Today, let's talk about coffee beans. If you're a coffee lover, this video is for you. Do you know this is the main reason many people fail to have a great cup of coffee, even when using good coffee equipment like the espresso machine and coffee makers? This is because the type of coffee beans you use to make your cup of coffee will determine the taste and flavor in your final cup of coffee. So your first step to making a great cup of coffee is choosing the right coffee beans. Most people consider the different prices, like the home baristas who will buy their coffee beans in the local grocery at a very cheap price. Some coffee shops will buy very expensive coffee beans, but not considering the factors that affect the flavor and aromas in the coffee beans, like the different types of coffee beans like the Arabica and Robusta, the origin of the coffee beans, and the different roast levels. All these factors influence the taste and flavor that you get in your final cup of coffee while using that coffee bean. So if you're a coffee lover struggling with choosing the right coffee beans to make your perfect cup of coffee, whether you make your coffee at home or in a coffee shop, don't worry, I've made this video so that I can guide you through the basic knowledge that will enable you to choose the right coffee beans to make the perfect cup of coffee. So starting with the three major factors that you need to consider when choosing the right coffee beans to make your cup of coffee. The first one, which is the different types of coffee beans. The second, which is the origin of the coffee bean. And the third one, which is the different roast levels of your coffee beans. So let's start with the first one, which is the different type of coffee beans. There are mainly 4 types of coffee beans, but the most common ones are 2, which are Arabica and Robusta. If you're to choose between these 2 coffee beans, the Arabica and the Robusta, the first key difference is going to be with the taste. If you make your coffee using the Arabica coffee beans, it's going to taste smoother and sweeter in the taste. It will give you flavor notes of the chocolate and hints of fruity and berries. Whereas if you brew your coffee using the Robusta coffee bean, the coffee is going to taste much stronger and bitter in the taste. It will give you flavor notes of the rubber and the hershey taste. And if you're considering the amount of caffeine between these 2 coffee beans, the Robusta coffee bean has higher amount of caffeine than the Arabica coffee beans. And for the pricing between these 2 coffee beans, the Arabica coffee bean is much expensive than the Robusta coffee beans. After understanding the different types of coffee beans, the second key factor that you need to understand are the different origin of coffee beans. I mean the countries that the coffee beans were grown will determine the taste and flavor that you get in your final cup of coffee. Each country, depending on the altitude and the environment, will provide a different taste in your cup of coffee. Like countries with a higher altitude with a perfect climate will produce better quality of coffee beans than countries producing coffee on a lower altitude. Here are some of the countries with the best condition of growing coffee. They have the highest coffee production in the world. First is Brazil, then Colombia and Ethiopia. If you're a small cafe or someone looking for a coffee origin to start with, you can choose on either of these 3 coffee origins because they are very popular across the world. In most of the coffee shops you can find these 3 coffee origins. Here is a tip that you need to consider. Most of the time Brazil is roasted for milk-based coffees because it has flavors of the chocolate and the nuts, and for the Ethiopia and Colombia it's often roasted for black coffees and espresso, even for the filter coffee if you're working in a specialty coffee shop, because they are often fruity in the taste. After the coffee is harvested, then it's being processed in the 3 different ways of processing coffee. We have the natural way, the washed and the honey process. Then the coffee will be shipped off to the coffee roaster, who's going to roast the coffee beans, bringing out the flavors and aroma of the coffee beans to enable you as a barista make the great cup of coffee. When the roaster is roasting the coffee beans, we'll roast the coffee beans considering the different levels. We have 3 major levels of roasting coffee beans. We have the light roast, medium and the dark roast. Here are the key differences that you need to consider if you are to choose the different roasting levels. Starting with the light roasted coffees, they are light brown in color, they have a mild and a fruity flavor. And for the medium roasted coffees, they are medium brown in color, they have little more body than the light roasted coffees, and they are slightly stronger in flavor than the light roasted coffees. And for the dark roasted coffees, they are dark brown in color, they have a bold, smoky and a bitter taste. If you love a brighter coffee with acidic flavors, then go for the light roasted coffees. And if you love your coffee well balanced, smooth in flavor, then the medium roasted coffees will be a perfect option for you. And if you prefer your coffee drink bold and intense in flavor, then you should try the dark roasted coffee beans. Now that you have learned these basic 3 factors that you need to consider when buying your coffee, here are the 2 most important tips that I can give you while making your cup of coffee. And the last one is the most important. The first one, which is the different roasting date of your coffee beans. You need to use a well-matured coffee beans. Every bag of coffee comes with a roast date, the day when the coffee was roasted. It needs to rest so that it can mature to be able to be brewed to make the perfect cup of coffee. In this process, the coffee is degassing and removing the carbon dioxide which was injected in the process of roasting the coffee beans. Make sure not to use old coffee beans because they have lost all the flavor and aroma. You won't be able to achieve the perfect taste while using the old coffee beans. And the last one, which is the coffee grind and the grind size. This is where most people will make a mistake and they will fail to make the great cup of coffee. Even when using the right coffee beans, as any person making coffee, you should understand the different grind size and how you can adjust it, because different coffee brew methods will require different grind size. This is why you should watch this video next, because it's a full guide guiding you through the different grind size and which brew method they can be perfect for and be able to make a great cup of coffee.